I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you for allowing me to have a look around your school. I was really impressed with the excitement and the energy levels that I saw as I walked into every classroom, and most importantly, it seemed that everybody was having fun, enjoying themselves. I strongly believe that the learner descriptions and the expectations that your school has are embedded in the way that I learn and the way that I lead and teach. So before I go into details about how my teaching ethos fits in with your learning ethos, there's a couple of things I just wanted to mention that underpin the way I go about with my learning, teaching and with my leading. First of all, I try and set up a safe zone. And that allows students and teachers to be able to explore new ideas without any fear of failure. And quite often, some of the best ideas have come from things that have been kicked out or things that weren't really appropriate at the time. At the end of the day, an idea is always a good idea. It just may not be at the right time or in the right place. Obviously, if you're going to foster a safe zone or a safe environment, then one of the most important things you're going to need to do, and one of the things that I work on really a lot, is to build really good relationships. And that's about building rapport with people, about understanding them, about knowing where they come from, knowing a little bit about them, and just making the best of every relationship that you have. So I suppose the question is, who am I? The Myers-Briggs test is a personality profiling test, and I come out as an ENFP. Which is deemed the inspirer. The E stands for extrovert, and I'm certainly an extrovert in most of the things I do, but I do appreciate that some people aren't, and some people are quite introverted, and I'm happy to change my manner to suit that person. The N stands for intuitive, and I'm certainly an intuitive person. I'm always looking for patterns in behaviour, patterns in learning, and I'm also looking for those possibilities of how I can extend that learner just that little bit further. The F is for feeling, and I'm certainly value driven. I've got a very high ethical and moral stance, and that governs the way that I deal with my situations, I would guess. The P stands for perceptive, and that means that I'm just a very flexible person. I'm very happy to have situations change very quickly and just adjust and just get on with it, really. So because of my personality type, I will challenge any barriers that I find that are impeding learning or impeding people coming up with new and exciting ideas. I'm very respectful of where people come from, where people are going, and their personalities themselves, and I think that's one of the ways in which I can actually suggest possibilities and new ideas to people without them feeling judged or feeling put upon. At the end of the day, if you don't respect somebody, then it doesn't make any difference what you say to them, they're just not going to listen to you. And I would say I'm probably one of those big picture people. I certainly sit outside the box when it comes to thinking about processes. Quite often I'll come up with a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist yet, but certainly will do later. And I'm certainly not afraid of tearing something down completely to its base level and then rebuilding it if it's not working. And obviously building those respectful relationships really helps with that kind of process and that kind of change management. I would class myself as a learning life coach, I guess, and certainly I've utilised the idea of role models to mirror good behaviour and good attitudes towards learning and development. I think we underestimate the effect that language has on our children's learning, and how just by simply changing the way that we phrase things, the effect on the learning can be astronomical. As a biologist and a neurobiologist, I welcome Carol Dweck's growth mindset idea into the educational arena. It's really interesting, and the fact of neuroplasticity coming into the educational arena now is really quite exciting for me. Also, James Nottingham has been a real role model for me. Certainly I've tried to foster a safe environment for kids to make mistakes and to learn, and his concept of the pit has really helped me to get that across to the children. I've also used the concepts of mindfulness to scaffold those children through those failures and through those times when things were really hard, so that they can start to climb out of that pit and then see the successes of hard work. Okay, so for me, learning is an adventure. We can spend so long worrying about the goals that we have to achieve and knowing if we've got there that we actually miss the most important part, which is the journey, the actual development as we go through that learning process. So obviously my students need to know where they've started from and where they're trying to end up. But we also need to embrace that journey and to celebrate their achievements as we go through that journey, not just the end point. And that way we can raise their self-esteem, we can increase their confidence levels and move them from that fixed mindset to that growth mindset, which is where we want them to be. So more than often when students come to year 7, year 8 and year 9, if maths isn't their favourite subject and they think it's boring, it's probably because they've already failed many times in maths, and the style of teaching, where we've got a more classical style, it's probably reinforced that they have failed their maths. The view of the curriculum is that they'll repeat it again later and they'll pick that up and they'll get better at it, but that's not always the case. Once you've failed once, then that sets a mindset up, and the student then when they approach a new subject or a new idea in maths, they've generalised their failures to the whole subject of maths, and that's a really hard mindset to get out of. But unless you educate the student that failure is actually something they have to go through to get out of that pit, to become a better mathematician, then it's not going to make any difference. You can just keep doing the same thing, and that student will always see everything they do as a failure. So working on that individualised plan with the student and incorporating mathematics, which is real, mathematics that means something to that student in their context, in their world, will certainly allow that student to engage and be more motivated into the learning process. And once you've got that motivation, then you can start to shift the fixed mindset into that growth mindset. And as a result, the student will find that mathematics can actually be fun. I would certainly be encouraging, particularly in mathematics, that the students can understand how they're learning and how their mind is actually working and what limitations they've set up that's stopping them from progressing. So remembering that learners learn best when they take responsibility for their own learning, and that learning in isolation leads to understanding in isolation, I feel one of the best ways to teach and to learn about these subjects is through project-based work. Now, obviously that would be driven very much from the student's perspective, from their world. They would, in my opinion, come up with their own projects, and the teacher would be the facilitator to allow them to investigate that project as much as they can. Now, there may be a connection between science and physical education. I can think of many connections there, looking at the muscle structures maybe of the body when it's doing particular exercises. It may be that that student wants to look at the effect of culture on those particular sports. Obviously, when you start looking at these types of projects, then you've got the possibilities of bringing in outside help, involving the community, maybe looking at community issues that you can actually then incorporate all the subjects into to actually solve a real problem outside and come up with a real solution. That way the kids are going to feel really, really proud of what they do, and that's going to really motivate them even more. I'm a great believer that all teachers wear many hats and that they can be whoever they need to be, whenever they need to be. I embrace teaching in subjects I haven't taught before. It keeps that creative flair inside me going. But I also appreciate that teaching outside of your comfort zone can sometimes be very difficult. So having a really strong team of experts and a real strong team of colleagues is really important when it comes to learning something and teaching something that's not really in your comfort zone. I'd certainly embrace working in a sharing environment and a team working environment where everybody's experiences can be shared by everybody to enhance the learning of all students and all teachers. Even though my specialties are maths, science and IT, as a primary UK trained teacher, I've certainly had to teach many different subjects through my teaching career, and they've been really enjoyable. And I've tried to make them as motivational and as inspirational as I can, but certainly through teamwork and through having really strong colleagues, that's been a lot easier. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. I would love to discuss my ideas with you in more detail, and I look forward to our next conversation.